It's 10 o'clock. This is Sky News at 10, live from Jerusalem. Our top story. Beirut is bombarded again as Benjamin Netanyahu claims to have altered the course of the war in the Middle East while vowing to retaliate against Iran.
No country in the world would accept such an attack on its citizens and towns, and neither will the State of Israel.
A Hamas commander is killed, and the man touted as the next Hezbollah leader is said to be unreachable after a series of Israeli airstrikes. And the Israeli military releases footage which it says shows an underground tunnel IDF soldiers raided, which belonged to Hezbollah forces.
Also ahead this hour, a number of people died trying to cross the channel, including a young child reportedly trampled to death. An XL bully seized by police and put down accidentally. Its owner says he's considering legal action. The hunt for one of Australia's most famous animals on the loose in Nottinghamshire. And we will take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from 10:30.
Hello, good evening. The Middle East is waiting tonight to see how and when Israel will retaliate against Iran for Tuesday's missile attack. In a recorded statement this evening, the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, said his forces have changed the balance of the war as the IDF claimed to have killed 440 members of Hezbollah. The Lebanese capital, Beirut, again came under heavy fire today, as did the city of Tripoli in the north of the country, with the Israeli military expanding the scope of its airstrikes. Well, tonight, Israel issued another warning to residents in Beirut's southern suburbs. These are the latest pictures from the capital coming into us in the last few minutes. Well, Israel has been targeting what it claims are Hezbollah infrastructure and terror targets, with several explosions in the capital, as you saw. A senior Hezbollah official, Hashem Safieddin, who was tipped to take over as the group's leader, reportedly hasn't been heard from since an airstrike on Friday. The Salah Handor hospital in southern Lebanon was hit during another strike. The IDF says it was targeting a Hezbollah command centre located in a nearby mosque. And the northern city of Tripoli was hit for the first time since this conflict began. A senior Hamas official was killed in a refugee camp there. According to the UNHCR, more than 200,000 people have fled Lebanon for Syria. The Masna highway, a key humanitarian route, was damaged by an Israeli strike yesterday. The IDF says it was being used to transport Hezbollah weaponry. And today in Gaza, residents in the Nusrat and Burej refugee camps located along the Netzarim corridor were urged to evacuate. Our security and defence editor Deborah Haynes reports now from northern Israel.
Impossible to hide a military footprint this size. The tanks and other fighting vehicles appeared this week in a field near Israel's border with Lebanon. By Saturday morning, though, they'd gone, unsafe to stay in one place for long. Empty ammunition cases, perhaps a sign they were ready for a fight. We head towards the border. An Israeli town sits on one side of the dividing line, a Lebanese village on the other. Frontline positions as Israel's ground troops push into Lebanon to take on Hezbollah, with the militant group launching hundreds of rockets back in return.
We're up close to the border with Lebanon. You can see it right behind me on the hillside. We can hear the distant sound of gunfire. We've heard outgoing rounds, and we've seen evidence of a lot of incoming fire.
But Hezbollah has been firing on communities across northern Israel for almost a year. It's why most of the families living at this kibbutz, just over a mile from the border, have fled. Shaul and his wife are among the few who've remained.
He
tells me how they've turned some rocket shrapnel into an ornament. their own act of defiance and resilience. This couple is no stranger to war.
I was born in the kibbutz, and in 1948 they evacuated all the children because of the war. After that I said, this is my home. No one will ever evacuate me again.
You can hear booms. Like, what's that like?
Fear, fear, fear. It's a lot of fear. And it affects our health, our psyche, our thoughts.
I'm not afraid.
That's why I sit close to Shaul. I can rely on him. Shaul works from here, and I work from here.
He supports Israel's attack against Hezbollah, but isn't sure it'll be enough to prompt everyone who's left to come back.
It's already been a year. People have moved on, found new schools for their children. Why should they return to all of this mess?
A day after speaking to us, a rocket landed close to the house. Peril, shattering the peace, but not their resolve. Deborah Haynes, Sky News, Northern Israel.
Well, this evening, the Israeli military released new images of what they described as Hezbollah tunnels close to the Israeli border. Sky News has been unable to verify these images or gain access to the tunnels ourselves. But the IDF say they were located 300 metres from the border, are 250 metres long. The Israeli Prime Minister addressing the nation tonight and said that Israel will respond to the Iran missile attack launched earlier this week.
We managed to destroy all the systems of rockets and missiles developed by Hamas throughout the years, and now our soldiers are also ruining all the tunnels that were created by the Hezbollah terrorists. Even though we haven't finished lifting these threats, we have clearly changed the course of the war and the balance of the war. Iran is behind all of these attacks on us, from Gaza, from Lebanon, from Yemen, from Syria, and of course from Iran itself. Iran has already launched into Israel hundreds of missiles twice in a ballistic missile attack, which is one of the biggest such attacks in history. No country in the world would accept such an attack on its citizens and towns, and neither will the State of Israel. Israel has both the duty and the right to defend itself and to protect itself from such attacks, and that's what we're going to do. Citizens of Israel, as we begin the new Jewish year, we do not forget, I do not forget, our 101 hostages in Gaza, and we are fully committed to do everything we can to bring them back home.
Well, our Middle East correspondent Alistair Bunkle joins me now. We will respond to Iran, he said, but he gave not one but two statements tonight, the second targeted.
Yes, the first delivered in Hebrew to a domestic audience and warning again that Israel will attack Iran after those ballistic missiles came in a number of days ago. The second statement in English, and it targeted a key Western ally of Israel's, France. The French, let's not forget, came to Israel's defense when Iran attacked back in April. Their jets were up in the sky. France is a key member of the EU, a key member of NATO, and a UN Security Council member. But in a message on Twitter, labeled "Message to Macron," not even using his title, not using his name, Netanyahu launched quite a broadside.
As Israel fights the forces of barbarism led by Iran, all civilized countries should be standing firmly by Israel's side. Yet President Macron and some other Western leaders are now calling for an arms embargo against Israel. Shame on them. Is Iran imposing an arms embargo on Hezbollah, on the Houthis, on Hamas, and on its other proxies? Of course not. The axis of terror stands together. But countries who supposedly oppose this terror axis call for an arms embargo on Israel. What a disgrace. Well, let me tell you this. Israel will win with or without their support, but their shame will continue long after the war is won.
Yeah, I mean, that is quite a message to the French president. Elysee saying tonight they remain a steadfast ally of Israel's. But I think this is partly wrapped up in what is going on in Lebanon. The French have huge history in Lebanon. They are seen as one of the countries that could perhaps help negotiate a ceasefire there. A ceasefire is nowhere close. Tonight we're seeing yet more heavy bombing of southern Beirut. The Israeli military is still operating in southern Lebanon. You were talking there about tunnels they claim to have uncovered. And so that part of the war is still in a very, very kinetic phase. What we are also looking at and anticipating is Israel's response to Iran. There's a lot of rumors around tonight, I think based on a number of factors. One, because the Rosh Hashanah holidays and Shabbat are now over. Secondly, Benjamin Netanyahu coming out and delivering that statement. Thirdly, General Michael Kurilla, who is the head of US Central Command, is in Israel tonight to supposedly coordinate this Israeli response. And Iran has closed its western airspace. So you take all of those together and people are wondering whether something might happen tonight because there's an assumption that it won't happen tomorrow night on the eve of the October the 7th anniversary. Truth be told, we, the West, regional countries around the Middle East are all guessing. I think the one thing we can say for certain is Israel is determined to hit Iran back.
Alistair, thank you very much indeed. Well, as we've just seen, the Lebanese capital has been hit with constant Israeli strikes once again. Our special correspondent, Alex Crawford, reports now from Beirut.
Beirut was hit through the day. Constant strikes aimed at its southern suburbs. And always Israeli drones buzzing above. So many strikes, rescue workers have mostly been prevented from entering. The scene on the ground captured by residents. The area once known as a Hezbollah stronghold is being broken apart strike by strike. The attacks come on the back of a huge Israeli attack 2 days ago in Dahia. It's believed to have been aimed at the likely new Hezbollah leader, Hasham Safadine, apparently killed before even being officially named, and his predecessor not yet buried. According to several media reports, he hasn't been heard of since Friday. There have been fresh areas targeted too by Israeli forces. For the first time, the northern city of Tripoli has been hit. The target was a leader of the Hamas armed wing, killed with 3 of his family in a Palestinian refugee camp in the town. The second Hamas leader to be killed by Israeli forces on the same night. The bombardment and the rising civilian deaths and injuries has prompted the French president to urge allies to halt arms deliveries to Israel, even as both Hamas and Hezbollah refuse to give in. And the IDF continues to prepare its response to Iran's attack earlier this week. The war has prompted an unprecedented humanitarian crisis in Lebanon, the worst displacement the country's ever seen, with 1.2 million people now out of their homes and living rough or in shelters. We've reported on the fears of emergency workers and doctors in the south, that they and their hospitals are being targeted. The UN says about 40 health facilities have been hit. And medics, at the latest to close, say they couldn't leave for 3 days before being bombed. The IDF claim a Hezbollah position was close to the Salaganda hospital without providing any evidence, a claim vehemently denied by the medics, with one senior doctor telling Sky News there are no Hezbollah positions either in the hospital or the mosque. The Bekaa Valley in the east was again hit, as the UN said the healthcare system is on the brink of collapse, and aid agencies said it's critical that there's a lull in strikes. Among those injured near Baalbek was a little girl playing in her front yard. We were at home and the kids were playing, her mother said, when suddenly our home was bombed and the kids hit. The Israeli military is bombing multiple areas of Lebanon, whilst also telling some reporters of plans to expand its operations on multiple fronts. And several countries scramble to get their citizens out of this and home. Alex Crawford, Sky News, Beirut.
Well, that bombing has continued tonight. This is the southern suburbs of Beirut, a heavy attack from the air. It comes as Benjamin Netanyahu declared tonight that Israel is fighting the forces of barbarism led by Iran. The US CENTCOM chief, General Michael Kurilla, landing in Israel earlier this evening. US President Joe Biden saying yesterday that US and Israel are in constant contact with each other. And we continue, of course, to await Israel's response to Iran. Our coverage of the Middle East continues, but for now, back to Kamali for more of the day's news.
Thank you, Anna. Well, here in the UK, tens of thousands attended a pro-Palestinian march in central London today. It's ahead of the one-year anniversary of the 7th of October Hamas attack on Israel that led to the current war in Gaza. Tom Cheshire has this report.
The pro-Palestinian marches have kept a steady rhythm for a year now. This was the 20th demonstration. But they are as loud as ever, perhaps louder. That's partly because this was to mark a year of the conflict, but also because that conflict has now widened. These signs are new: hands off Lebanon. Waiting for them down the road, a smaller pro-Israel demonstration.
On the 8th of October, they started rocket attacks on Israel. They are the aggressor. 70,000 Israelis have had to leave their homes. There are fires raging throughout the whole of northern Israel, and we don't hear any about it.
This is the only point in the march where two sides come face to face. Over here, thousands of people streaming past. They're being kept apart. These are organisers for the pro-Palestine march. I'll keep them. But they are really eye to eye here. And then on the other side, smaller in number, but making a very, very loud noise, very, very passionate. The pro-Israel side come out to make sure that their feelings are known too.
Other countries don't designate it as a terrorist organisation. So no, not the whole world doesn't.
Those confrontations continued in isolated pockets along the route. The feeling on both sides is visceral. No common ground here, even thousands of miles away from conflict.
Terrorist supporters off our streets.
The marches have been controversial from the start, and they remain so. The organisers say Israel is committing genocide, a charge Israel and the US completely reject. And there was no mention of the Israeli hostages still being held by Hamas.
This started with a Hamas attack. It's just not mentioned. There's no call for Hamas to do anything as well.
Well, I think people have got longer memories than a year here. And what you have to remember is that in every year, since the State of Israel was founded, more Palestinians have been killed than Israelis. So when people look at the full history, they don't quite have October the 7th as the only starting point.
The crowds in London were large, but they were matched around the world. In France, in Italy, and in South Africa.
This week, Palestinian children.
This is a conflict that, a year on, continues to reverberate around the world. Tom Cheshire, Sky News, Central London.
Now, authorities in France say that 4 people have died trying to cross the Channel. The country's interior minister says a child is among those to have lost their lives. Sadia Chowdhury reports.
A double tragedy today. 4 people lost their lives attempting to reach the UK. 2 men, a woman, and a child who is thought to have been crushed and suffocated to death as people rushed onto a boat. It hadn't even set sail. Both boats had over 80 people on board, a seemingly new and dangerous number of occupants. The blood is on the hands of the criminal gangs who organise the journeys. That's according to French Interior Minister Bruno Retailleau. Our government, he promised, will intensify the fight against these mafias who are getting rich by organising these crossings of death. The reason they get rich is because there's no let-up in demand among those wanting to reach the UK. There were more crossings yesterday and more today. The total number of people arriving this way this year is now over 25,000. The new UK government has a plan eerily similar to ones laid out by previous Home Secretaries, a joint international agreement with European countries to cooperate closely, share intelligence and crack down on the gangs together. But that hasn't worked in the past. As the sun goes down on another dark day on the English Channel, a warning from human rights groups that this could happen again.
I don't think it will have the impact that they want. I don't think it's going to prevent more deaths in the Channel. Safe and legal routes are the only answer.
2024 is looking like the deadliest for small boat crossings in recent years. Sadia Chowdhury, Sky News, in Dover.
Now, Lancashire Police has apologised to a family for putting their pet down because of what they described as an administrative error. The force said it's now put in place new processes to ensure similar mistakes can't be made again. Our North of England correspondent Charlotte Leeming reports.
2-year-old Bruno was a much-loved part of the Halliwell family. He was seized by Lancashire Police in August under the Dangerous Dogs Act, whilst his owners were in the process of completing an exemption certificate to keep him. 4 weeks later, they were told he'd been euthanised.
I got a phone call off the inspector saying, would you be able to come to the police station? We need to inform you about Bruno and what's happened. So I went to the police station and he said, we've apologised so much for this loss. We've put the dog down. We didn't mean to put your dog down, and they said really sorry. It was an error on an email. It's devastation, to be honest, and it's devastation to all the kids as well. We are all upset and we'd love him to come back, but we couldn't actually have him back at all.
Lancashire Police apologised to Connor and his family. They say it was an admin error which led to Bruno being put down by mistake. The force say processes are now in place, meaning it won't happen again.
The XL bully dogs were added to the list of banned breeds at the end of last year after a series of incidents where people were killed or injured. Ownership is restricted under the Dangerous Dogs Act. Since February, it's been a criminal offence to own one without an exemption certificate. You can't breed, sell, abandon, give away or let the dog stray. And they're also not allowed out in public without a lead and a muzzle. Connor's MP, Lizzie Collins, has written to Lancashire Police asking them how this mistake was allowed to happen.
People were very concerned about dangerous dogs, and people have died through dog attacks, and it's really important that that's addressed. I know there are different views on the legislation, and I think they should all be brought together. But what's really important in this case is that the proper process should have been in place, and the proper process wasn't followed.
Police are sorry for the distress caused by this error, but that's little comfort to the Halliwell family.
At the end of the day, it's an innocent dog what hasn't done nothing. It's not bit anyone. It's not literally being aggressive to anyone. It's a wonderful dog. It was really quiet. It was bouncing around because it was only 2 years old. There was nothing wrong with that dog. It was just like a giddy dog.
Connor says it will take years for him to get over the shock and grief of losing Bruno. Charlotte Leeming, Sky News, Morecambe.
All right, let's get the latest sports news now. Here's Mark.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality. Getting more people more active. Live life with Vitality.
Tea at the cricket. For many, it's as important as the action on the pitch. Egg and cress sandwiches, tea, scones and cake. But that's not the tradition everywhere.
So, here we go. It's chicken. Oh, it's chicken.
In the summer, the ECB launched their Taste of Cricket campaign, celebrating diversity at clubs around the country. This event in London even had a touch of glamour.
Roll up, roll up, roll up for Carl's Jerk Chicken.
You think about the diversity in cricket, all the countries that are involved with that, to just have to say, what do you do for afternoon tea? What do you eat? Most people think of cucumber sandwiches or a bit of egg and cress, and then suddenly you come to the Shepherd's Bush cricket ground where we are today, and it's all about jerk chicken and wonderful Jamaican patties and stuff.
For cricket bosses, this is just one small step in rebuilding the damaged reputation of the game and making it open to everyone.
Cricket has had a lot of issues around discrimination, ethnicity, race, gender, and we were trying to find ways to bring communities together, create some more trust, not suggesting for a second that we put on some community events and then all of cricket's issues are resolved. But alongside all of the policy changes, I think it's really important that these community events that celebrate people, celebrate all of the different communities that exist within cricket, are still really important to do at the same time.
For Club Life member Carl Menzies, a day watching the cricket is much better with a dash of fun, food and community.
The cricket is not just, cucumber sandwiches, you know what I mean? Especially West Indians, we like our good food on a cricket day, you know what I mean? On a Sunday, you go to play and you get your rice and peas and you get your jerk this and your jerk that. And so food, cricket, music is all integral part of, Caribbean cricket.
English cricketer Chris Jordan was born in Barbados, and the day brought back some special childhood memories.
A really refreshing experience, I'd say. I think from the time I walked through the gates here today, I really felt the welcoming. I felt the inclusiveness, and yeah, the food helped as well. But no, I think it's a really special thing they have going on here, so I was glad to be a part of it.
Cricket brought the family together, and my Uncle Tim would come over, my Uncle Vic would come over, Uncle Dubs and Auntie Cherry, and everybody would congregate, and it was all centred around cricket, but food was there. Whether that be jerk chicken, rice and peas, coleslaw, you name it, patties, all sorts of things that went on. That was all about bringing families and people together. It's like what's happening here today.
Lasting memories formed and friendships made. But will it help communities up and down the country rediscover their taste for cricket? Chris Reedy, Sky Sports.
I don't care if Manchester United don't win football matches all the time. I genuinely don't.
This Sky News Sports Bulletin is brought to you by Vitality.
Thank you for that, Mark. Now, if you thought you had to travel to the other side of the world to see a wallaby, you can save the airfare. There have been plenty of sightings of the marsupials in Nottinghamshire. So many that it's believed they're now living wild in the county. We asked our correspondent, Lisa Dowd, to try and track some of them down.
This is generally where I found them. This is long grasses. So they love to snack on this.
Where once the ancient Sherwood Forest stood, giving shelter to Nottingham's outlaws, an even more elusive character is being sought.
They've got two things there. They've got a place where they could be all snuggly and cuddle at night, and there, in front of us, long grasses is what they would eat.
In July, this wallaby was photographed nearby in Culverton, and soon after, golfers filmed one hopping along the edge of their course.
If you don't know, wallabies are basically small kangaroos and shouldn't be anywhere near the UK.
James has found a number of wallabies in the wild in the UK.
They can survive here really well. I know they're from Australia, but it's usually Tasmania, and it's a very similar climate to what we have here. Generally, it's releases or escapees. You can own a wallaby in this country like you would own a cat or a dog. So if you just wanted to pay a few £100s, you could have your own wallaby. And they're escape artists. So if they want to get out, they will get out.
Daniel says he saw one here in June.
At first, it looked like a rabbit. Kind of because it was kind of bent over. So it was like the back of its head. So it was just the ears and the top of its head. And then it stood up and it was kind of unrecognisable. I mean, you couldn't mistake it for what it was.
Wallaby sightings have been made to the north and east of Nottingham. One expert estimated that if it was the same one, it would have had to do at least 14,000 hops across the county.
That's a very large distance. There's no reason a wallaby would need to travel that far. So we're now wondering whether there's been more than one escape recently, or whether wallabies have been in the Nottinghamshire countryside without us realising for longer than we thought.
If anyone does actually manage to spot a wallaby out here, then conservationists do want to hear from you. No one knows how many are actually out here. But without the right kit, the marsupials can be hard to see, and some seem to have found the perfect hideouts in certain parts of the UK. Lisa Dowd, Sky News, Nottinghamshire.
Well, that was Sky News at 10. Coming up, we'll take a first look at tomorrow's papers in the press preview. Tonight, we're joined by the barrister and broadcaster Bobby Friedman and the political correspondent at Politics, Ava Santina Evans. Guys, thanks very much. Among the stories we'll be discussing this on the front of the Sunday People about the intensifying conflict in the Middle East. Their headline, Last Flight Out of Hell. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We'd been warned that we would meet people in the lowest moment of their lives.
Their story is one of fundamental American failure. Well, a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club, but I have to say there are more media here than there are supporters.
We love Trump!
I've witnessed the remarkable passion for politics here, but the anger too. This is just the audience that Joe Biden wanted.
Is this the moment to reform gun laws?
You know, it's easy to go to politics.
But it's important, it's at the heart of the issue.
For all the talk of a toned-down, humbled Trump, yes, maybe there was just a little less rhetoric, a little less divisiveness, but in the end it was the same rhythm, the same speech, the same man.
All them people that died in Russia and Ukraine, they'd still be alive today if Donald Trump was president.
If it was my wish, have a businessman that's strong like Trump, but maybe just doesn't say as much, you know?
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What we've been allowed to see over here is a humanitarian corridor, free wherever you get your news.
A young American medical student is making remarkable things happen.
I've seen a lot of difficult things, and honestly, it breaks my heart. These children don't deserve that.
I don't think there's a single Arab I know who isn't seriously disturbed by what's going on.
And so they gathered for this wonder of nature.
I'm very excited right now.
This is an extraordinary moment beyond anything I could have expected. Sky News, get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Significant day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid. And this is what's left of it.
Ten heavy vehicle.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
I say, bring it on.
With America divided and tensions running high, get ready for an election like no other.
Join our teams as we follow the campaign trail as America decides.
We will win, win, win.
Get closer to the action this US election with full reaction and analysis.
Sky News, the full story first.
Hello, you are watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half an hour, we're going to see what is making headlines with the barrister and broadcaster Bobby Friedman and the political correspondent at Politics, Ava Santina Evans. Guys, thanks very much for giving up your Saturday night. Let's see what's on some of those front pages. Last Flight Out of Hell, the Sunday People pictures the devastation of Israeli attacks on Beirut and the struggle of some Brits to escape. Writing in the Sunday Times, the Prime Minister calls on all sides in the conflict to back away from the brink and says hatred of Jews and Muslims in Britain has risen since the October the 7th attacks a year ago. In the Sunday Telegraph, it leads with a warning of what it calls mortgage misery after Treasury analysis showed the Chancellor's plan to borrow more to fund spending could push mortgage rates up by 1.25%. The Observer leads with what it says are growing doubts over the plan to charge VAT on private school fees because of fears it could lead to administrative chaos, job losses and also impact the state sector. The Mirror has news of a new simple blood test which can detect the 12 most common types of cancer before symptoms show. The Sunday Express reports troops in the Falklands are on alert in case Argentina makes a fresh attempt to take them. It's after the UK gave up control of most of the Chagos Islands last week. And the Mail claims an exclusive with news that teenage boys face possible investigation by anti-terror police if they make sexist remarks in class using powers originally intended to combat Islamic extremism. And a reminder, by scanning the QR code you see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's papers while you watch along with us. All right, as I said, tonight we're joined by the barrister and broadcaster Bobby Friedman and by political correspondent at Politics Joe, Ava Santina Evans. Guys, thanks very much for being with us. Let's get straight into it. We're going to start with page 7 in the Express, Ava. We are waiting, I guess, to see what the Israeli reaction will be to that barrage of missiles from last week. But while that wait goes on, the bombing of Lebanon continues.
Well, yes, the Israeli Defence Forces are currently continuing their bombing campaign of Beirut this evening. So most of these airstrikes have been conducted sort of past midnight, and that's begun again. The IDF have said that 2 Hamas chiefs have been killed in those strikes, but there are also collateral damage of nearly, well, I think it's about 1,100 people now, civilians who have been killed during these strikes. You're now also looking at around 1.2 million people who've been displaced around the region. The IDF are hoping to move people north. They're hoping to move Hezbollah north, but actually a lot of people are moving further south, and you'll find all along the south now there are refugee camps, and there are a lot of people who are hiding out in schools and hiding out in areas there. But yes, it continues as we speak right now, that the bombing continues.
Yeah, and we've actually got the latest picture. This was just 45 minutes or so ago. More airstrikes, it would seem, on southern Beirut. And Bobby, look, humanitarian crisis is looming. I mean, it probably speaks to how dangerous it is for some people in Lebanon right now that people are going back to Syria.
Yes, it certainly is it's a terrible situation. Any situation in which civilians are being affected, it obviously is something that upsets anyone. We obviously have to look at the genesis of this. You know, we talk about displaced civilians. There have been 60,000, 70,000 Israeli civilians in the north of Israel who haven't been able to be in their homes for the last year. This conflict started prior to any Israeli retaliation for October 7th because Hezbollah started bombing Israeli civilians. So, and Hezbollah had been in breach of UN Resolution 1701 consistently, which required Hezbollah to be north of the Litani River. So this is a terrible situation, and the key thing is to try and minimise any loss of civilian life. But I do think we also need to have a broader perspective about what's going on here, which is that an Iranian proxy has been for the last year sending rockets towards civilian areas. And so I think when you look at what has caused this to happen, and we end up in this appalling situation, that is the genesis of that situation.
Let's just move on to the front of the Telegraph, if we can now as well, to this story in the sidebar. We're just days away now from the anniversary of October the 7th. It's going to be marked on Monday. There was a pro-Palestinian protest in London today. And take us through this reporting that seems to suggest on the front of the Telegraph that there was a sign there saying "I love Hezbollah."
Yes, and look, frankly, I don't think this comes as any surprise to anyone who's been looking at the process that we've seen in London over the past year. Now, of course, a huge number of people go on these protests with the right motives, and people obviously are entitled to express their views. But I think that for far too long, and this goes to Mark Rowley, the head of the Met Police, the Met Police has been allowing inappropriate, racist slogans, often in support of terrorist organisations, to be a part of these protests. And what you see, one of the banners that's highlighted here on the front of the Telegraph is an "I love Hezbollah" banner, which is actually an offence contrary to the Terrorism Act. But, you know, the crowds there chanting Yemen, Yemen, turn another ship around in support of the Houthis who are firing rockets at ships in international shipping channels. And fundamentally, I think there has been a failure of policing by the Met, allowing, right from just after October the 7th, allowing genocidal slogans, like from the river to the sea, globalise the Intifada, to become normalised as part of these protests. And we have to allow people to protest when they have legitimate concerns, and as I say, a lot of people there do, but I think we have to accept that these have become hate marches for far too many people on them without the Met stepping in properly.
I think that might be a little bit unfair. I mean, there were 300,000 people who were on that march today, so I don't think we could define it as a hate march. I do think that this particular sign, I mean, it is inflammatory and it's outrageous, and there have been a number of arrests today. It's
15 arrests, I think.
15 arrests. But it's very, I mean, so the Met are exercising their powers.
The Met is not exercising powers because people carrying this sign, for example, are not arrested at the time, and it's always done by reports to the Met afterwards on social media. Why are the police officers who are there not arresting people at the time? I find that pretty astonishing.
Do you know what? I would actually agree with you up to a point. I would say that I've covered a number of these marches, and they are very difficult, actually, to police, and they are very difficult to control when you're there. I mean, the sheer scale, 300,000 people there, it's almost like, you know, when you're at a football match and someone gets into a fight and you go, well, how on earth has that been allowed to happen? I don't think that that should be seen as a reflection of the broad intent of the people who are on that march today. But, you know, I would say the Met should exercise their powers.
Yeah, and look, I'm not suggesting that it does reflect the majority of the people who are there. But it's as much needed as it is for the people who are legitimately on that march as for the people who are offended and affected by this, because it delegitimises the whole thing when consistently, and it happens every time, there is this kind of hate, obvious anti-Semitism taking place in all of these marches. And as I say, I think this is a failure because there are policy decisions by the Met. The slogan "From the river to the sea" is a genocidal slogan which the Met has legitimised. Globalise the Intifada, the same. And the Met is allowing this to happen every
So are you expecting for the police to be arresting people at every single point where they see this happening? Is that what you would want to happen, Bobby?
Yes, because, well, I mean, if you glorify Hezbollah, which is a prescribed terrorist organisation under the Terrorism Act, I mean, that's a criminal offence. So if the police are there, why not arrest them?
I mean, the argument is that they, as Ava was saying, the vast majority of people on these marches are peaceful, and therefore they're not making those arrests, which is. Well, I'm
sure they are, and but I'm saying if you're someone who goes on the march with the best of intentions, as I'm sure 100,000 people do, surely you don't want someone next to you standing with an "I love Hezbollah" banner any more than you'd want someone with an "I love Islamic State" banner next to you. It's bad for everybody.
And I would agree with you, but of course we are doing this on the backdrop of Beirut being bombed to smithereens. So I do think that, you know, perhaps we should give that a little bit more time than this silly person who's brought that sign.
Well, I mean, but I take the point. But
final point.
But obviously you have to look. Part of the reason for the problems in Beirut, and as I said, I have many friends in Lebanon, and I'm extraordinarily concerned about the civilians there. But part of the problem is because of this very organisation, Hezbollah, which is launching rockets from southern Lebanon. That's part of the problem.
OK, let's move on to the next story, if we can. And this is on the front of the Sunday Telegraph as well. This is the main story about mortgage misery. Bobby, do you want to start us with this?
Yes, so this is the Chancellor's plans potentially to liberalise, loosen the borrowing rules. Essentially, it would allow investment in public finances to count as investment for the purposes of the borrowing rules. And there is official modelling which suggests that this might end up pushing up interest rates by as much as 1.25% for the average mortgage, costing about £200 a month. Now, I'm not an economist, I don't know whether that is accurate or not, but obviously I think this is something that will probably give Rachel Reeves some pause for thought when she's putting together her budget, on the basis that would be an unwanted side effect. Obviously, you can see why she's desperate to find a bit of headroom to be able to invest, get the economy moving, but this could end up backfiring.
I guess fears of mini-budget in the big budget that she's putting forward on 30th of October.
Yes, so this is about redefining debt, redefining national debt. So, you know, essentially, if you redefine it, increasing debt towards sort of productive investment rather than counting it towards GDP, part of our national debt, then that would mean that there is more headroom to invest. The fiscal studies that suggest if you borrow an extra, well, I think it was around 50 billion. Gosh, 5 billion.
50 billion.
50 billion. It didn't feel right coming out of my mouth. What is? Yeah, it didn't feel right. 50 billion. Anyway, not a number I'm that familiar with. But yes, if you borrow another 50 billion, then yes, it could send the mortgage market into haywire.
But this is the thing, isn't it? Because these fiscal rules are self-imposed, aren't they? And there is some kind of jiggery-pokery that can be done to try and give Rachel Reeves more room because she doesn't want to put up taxes.
Yes, they could, because she's promised that we're not going to see any tax rises on working people. But, I mean, this is all to be revealed in the budget.
I suppose the danger is as well whether or not, the pitch has been laid properly, if they've prepared markets for any kind of change that are going to be coming.
Yeah, and I mean, this story suggests that some of it is baked in, and for the long-term rate says an expectation there will be a bit more borrowing. But as I say, I mean, the Chancellor is in a very difficult position because obviously she's going to have to raise taxes. So she's looking for any way possible to try and minimise that. And this is part of the problem you have when you've gone through an election campaign. She's made a series of pledges, and I'm sure she wishes that she hadn't had to do that politically.
Well, we've only got a minute left, but let's go on to one of those pledges. And this is on the front of the Observer, isn't it? This is about the VAT plan for private schools. Much touted, I thought it was fine, and then suddenly we're starting to see some problems.
Well, this is Labour haven't confirmed this will take place on the 1st of January, so perhaps they're going back to the drawing board. They had received quite a lot of criticism about it not being properly, we didn't have a proper report on it, we didn't see the impact assessment of it, so perhaps this is them reconsidering bringing it in as quickly as they planned to originally.
Why was it being rushed through for January? I mean, surely the start of the school year would have been a better place to do it.
It's probably more logical. I guess Labour just wanted to get on with it, right?
It was a big promise, wasn't it?
Yeah, and in a way it's quite easy to say you're going to do it, but I think for schools, probably bringing it in a bit slower, and there are these boring VAT issues, which is, until they can register for VAT, they can't then charge it. And if you're charging people in advance for the terms, it's quite difficult. So I think it maybe would be easier for everyone if you just bring it in the summer, and it gives everyone a bit more time to kind of get used to it.
And also they're avoiding another winter fuel disaster because they didn't obviously commission the impact assessment on that, and so they're concerned about potential bad press of doing it all over again.
Poor Emily Thornberry got sacked for saying there might be some of these logistical issues with this policy, so I don't know what she's thinking about it.
Feeling some sympathy for Emily Thornberry. All right, Bobby, Ava, thanks both for that. All right, plenty more to come, including this in the Telegraph, the headline, weight loss injections, no excuse to put your feet up, says the Health Secretary Wes Streeting. We'll discuss that next.
In politics is at an all-time low. What's going wrong and can we fix it? It's from Liz. She wants to know, why is there still no sign of the Labour Party electing a woman as leader?
It's sort of embarrassing. It takes a very strong man to be leader, but it takes an even stronger man to support a woman for leader.
If you want to be mean to politicians, crack on. The activists that go out and make elections happen, I kind of feel just don't be horrible to them. Be polite to them in the same way that they're polite to you.
Keir Starmer has got us into government with a big majority. He was completely clear before the election that he wasn't going to be able to do the two-child benefit policy, but I wouldn't be surprised if it isn't an early thing that comes along.
I went up to Gordon Brown and said, hello? No, yes, where is it? I said, found all these Tory candidates breaking land. Let me see it. This is brilliant.
They have breached the road. There is a lot of gas being fired all around us. शांति से इनको समझाओ वरना ये हम लोग It is an absolute carnival kind of atmosphere out here for Prime Minister Modi's decisive victory. These students are defying the prohibitory orders, and now they're going to be arrested.
We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news. The roads have been inundated. The only way out is to get people by boat. What is feared that over 200 people might have died because of these landslides. This on any given day would have been bustling with people, but today it's absolutely deserted. This is one of the most sensitive areas of northeast Delhi where there's been clashes. I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday. I'm ready. Are you? Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview with me, the barrister and broadcaster Bobby Friedman, and the political correspondent at Politics Show, Ava Santina Evans. Guys, let's get on with this and look at the front of the Sunday Express. Bobby, I know you like this story. Why don't you take us through this? Come on.
So, yes, it's the suggestion in the Falklands that troops are on red alert. I mean, I think we can probably safely say that troops aren't really on red alert. This obviously follows from the decision in relation to the Chagos Islands. I mean, I think what is the more interesting aspect of the story is that obviously Keir Starmer was asked about Gibraltar and the Falklands and didn't give an unequivocal response, which I find quite surprising because the position in relation to the Chagos Islands is obviously much more difficult. There's been an ICJ ruling in relation to it. We've obviously ended up with a 99-year lease of Diego Garcia. So you can argue the rights and wrongs of that backwards and forwards. I do think it's interesting not to give that unequivocal statement that the Falklands and Gibraltar are going nowhere, because I think those are in very different positions, most notably because of the populations in both of those places obviously want to continue being British overseas territories.
I mean, do Argentina and Spain want both of them back?
Well, Milei, in Argentina, Javier Milei has sort of like flip-flopped on whether he cares or not about the Falklands. But it's something I think that perhaps a generation above my own, and I'm not looking at you, it's more in your consciousness. But I
was not. Can I just point out, I was not alive during the Falklands War.
No, I didn't think
Despite
you were.
What you
to point out because I've looked at you. But look, I do think the story does feel a little bit like a red herring. I mean, it doesn't quite, maybe a bit of a false flag, because in light of what's happening on the Chagos Islands, this sort of feels like the natural Sunday Express. Front page following that. But, if you look at what's gone on with the Chagos Islands and speaking to a few Chagosians, they're not particularly happy with being given back to Mauritius and being completely left out of any of the decision-making in terms of what happens going forward. So perhaps we should speak to some people who live on the Falklands.
I think they would say they want to be part of Britain. Is there anyone around this table who was alive when that was happening? I don't
believe it.
I can't remember anyway. All right, let's move on to the front. The Telegraph. And this one is all about those weight loss injections. I'm going to start with you again, Bob, because I know that you're into this story too, aren't you?
I'm not on weight loss injections before you
Never
suggested
you were.
But so Wed Street...
He's getting battered, isn't he?
So the Health Secretary, Wed Street, is saying that weight loss injections are no excuse to put your feet up. And that is obviously right, which is that if you take Ozempic or whichever your weight loss injection is of choice, others are available, then obviously it's probably not going to work in the long term if you don't do something to back that up. You want to start eating more healthily and you want to start exercising. But equally, I am a big fan of weight loss injections because I think people... Look, some people find it hard. Not everyone has amazing willpower or loves going for a run, and people need a bit of a helping hand. And obviously, obesity is a huge problem. It's a huge problem for individuals in terms of life expectancy. It's a massive problem for the NHS and what it costs society. So the fact that we do have these drugs which can help people to lose weight, I think is a wonderful thing. I don't think people should be ashamed of being on it. I think people should be fine about it. We wear glasses. Sometimes you need a bit of help. That's all fine.
Absolutely. I mean, the drug behind it, the semaglutide, is quite a wonder drug. There are other applications for it as well that they're still kind of looking at. What do you think? Do you think we should everyone who needs it should be on it?
Well, it's tricky because, the weight loss jab only helps you, lose the weight to begin with. It doesn't change your mindset. And actually, a lot of the time when people are clinically obese, that is connected to their mental health or their mental state. So if you're not bridging the gap between, coming off of Ozempic and then going into your normal eating habits, if you're not assisting someone with that transition, then your weight is just going to flip-flop. And I can imagine that would be terrible for your heart going forward. So, I'm not a massive fan of Ozempic. I think you should you do it the old-fashioned way. I think it might be better for your mental health.
There was a time not long ago as well when people were struggling to get their diabetes medication because everyone was taking the Ozempic as well, which is another issue with this.
Yes. I don't think that was linked to Boris Johnson going to invade Holland. I think that was for the COVID jabs, but perhaps he was actually going to invade for Ozempic.
That was something entirely
different. Personal use, I don't know.
But we're happy for people to be taking it, yeah? That's what we're saying, Bobby. You think we should all be...
Yes, but I really think it's anything that... As I say, I entirely
Science
agree.
moves on.
But
right?
science moves on, and some people need that helping hand. I agree with Wes Streeting, which is saying you can't just sit back and say, I'll let this drug do it for me, and you do need to have some personal responsibility when you can. But look, going to the gym that first time, particularly if you are a bit overweight and you're not in the best of shape, it's difficult. If you can just sort of slim down a bit, feel better about yourself, feel less body conscious, though people shouldn't feel body conscious anyway, hasten to add. I think it's the kind of thing for some people in the right circumstance, it really is a help.
All right, Bobby, Ava, thanks both. More from you later on this evening. Thank you for now. Now, coming up on Sky News at 11, we'll have more on the conflict in the Middle East as Israel continues to strike the Lebanese capital, Beirut, with more airstrikes this hour. We'll have the very latest next.